When my grandfather came from Italy to Boston, unbeknownst to me, only about 10 years ago, did I realize that my grandfather was in the pizza business. And when he came over here, his dream was to open an olive oil company. Right. And what he did is he purchased olive oil from Italy, brought it over, and he canned it himself. And he had three different, he used to blend them, and he had three different types of oil. So what he wanted to do before, just after he married my grandmother, was he was an entrepreneur through and through, so he wanted to get into business for himself. So he decided to open a little pizza place in 1940 on Revere Beach. My grandmother said to me, going back about 12 or 13 years ago, as I was telling you, she was, her and I were talking, she said, your grandfather would be so proud of yourself for going into the pizza business. You know, he was in the pizza business. Yeah. Now at the time, my grandmother's, 80-something years old, yeah. 88 years old. I said, Grandma, you mean the olive oil business? She says, no, we were in the pizza business. I said, Grandma, what do you mean we were in the pizza business? She said, we were only in there for a year. Not a lot of people know about it. Your uncle took it over, his brother. And then within a year or two, they gave it away. Yeah. And I said, Grandma, you don't have a picture of this, do you? She says, maybe I do. I don't know. Let me check. And maybe about 3 months later, she showed up. I went over her house. She gave me a picture. It wasn't 3 inches big. And it was all wrinkled and tattered and torn. Right. And I spent about $1 billion to get it fixed to look like this. I just kept getting it done over and over and over again. So we are very active in the communities that we go in. I like to become part of the fabric of every community we go in, whether we buy something, whether we start our charitable organization, the Lupoli Family Foundation. Well, one of the things we wanted to do in Lawrence is we wanted to revitalize the downtown. Now, as the crow flies, we're literally probably a half a mile from downtown. So I wanted to start a business. Now, I'm not in any other business than the Italian foods and certainly the pizza business. So I said, what are we going to do? So I said, let's start a pizza business. Well, I couldn't go down there with a Sal's Pizza or a Salvatore's. We're right over here. We're not Dunkin' Donuts. You can be across the street from each other. So I said, I know what we'll do. So we invested quite a bit of money. Well over $250,000, close to $300,000. And following the mayor's message in Lawrence, which is try to revitalize the community, we opened a store. We hire locally. It has to be, if you're not local, we're not hiring you. And we opened a restaurant, and what do you think I called it? Pizzeria Napolitano. So right now, if you go downtown, there's a store open. We created like 5 or 6 jobs locally for the kids. We keep all the money locally, by the way. We take the profits and we invest it back into the local community downtown. It's called Pizzeria Napolitano. This picture sits in that restaurant, but it's really, it's really certainly a tribute to my family, my mother and my father, and generations, and certainly generations to come. But it's also a reminder of something very simple, right? Who you are in life is where you came from. So when I look at this picture, I remember and I can see a hardworking immigrant family that came from Italy. That's right. I see my family looking and expecting the best. Yeah. Right? And that's what my family did. They expected the best. They wanted you to look out for your fellow people, and that's what we do, right? We look out. We have the foundations all over the place. We are very active in our community. And this was passed down to my father, and my father, believe it or not, my father was a very sick man for 20 years of his life, but one of his biggest wishes to me was to make an impact on people's lives, our family, right? And he used to make me promise him that. And that's something that's talked about through our culture for years and years and years. It's part of the secret of our success, which is the way we extend ourselves to the communities and to people that need it. And the promise that he made me make, I was 15 years old, and we talk about it all the time. I talk about it in all my literature. Was making a difference in people's lives, whether it was a fellow worker or people you haven't even met yet, he said. And I'm proud to say that, our organization, almost 1,000 strong, almost 50 retail stores, various types of other divisions we have, Imagine being in the food business, and the kids that I hired 26 years ago not only have children, but what's exciting is some of the families that have been working with me for 26 years, because of Sal's Pizza or our hospitality business, or the Lupoli family, or the people that work in our organization, their children are now in college. They own homes because of our organization. That's like the real deal. That's the game changer, right? That's what it's all about. That's real. That's genuine. it's not about the number of zeros after the one anymore. That game is over. What we do is we go to work and we say, how can we collectively build our circle, enlarge our circle, create a change, a positive change, and along the way try to have some fun and do the right thing. And if more people think like that, I think we're heading in the right direction if you did that. And the proof is we do it. We just don't talk the talk. We do it. So it's good stuff. So in everything that I own, my real estate, everything that we advertise in the hospitality, you'll see this picture to remind you and to remind me I can always do better. I wanted to be an entrepreneur through and through. While I was at Northeastern, I started looking for locations. I found one when I was in college. 6 months later, after graduating, I was working in a pizza store because I was so passionate about being an entrepreneur. Yeah. But it wasn't a family business, right? It wasn't a business I bought. It was strictly something from the ground up. And the idea was a family and friends that came together and for a common goal. And I tell people all the time, we don't have to share the same blood for you to be part of my family. The family comes from loyalty and respect and understanding. And if we can do that with each other, then we'll live forever with each other. And we'll watch each other's back and we'll grow together. A vision is not a vision unless it's shared. It's a shared vision, right? I can't have a vision and just push my vision forward. I can only push it forward as if we agree on what that vision is and fight together. And that's what my guys do and gals. They're the best. What I've learned is if you don't have an exit strategy when you open anything, in particular, let's just talk about my business. Literally, the first week that I opened my business, I said, okay, how am I exiting this? Not because I wanted to get out of the business, not because I didn't love it, because I love it and I still do. Right. Because if you don't have an exit strategy, therefore you don't have a finish line. If you don't have a finish line, what are you striving for every single day? Otherwise, you're just going to exist. And you're going to wake up in 30 years and say, first of all, I didn't accumulate this, because there was no exit to it. There was no finish line. Yeah. So the first thing I decided to do was to create an exit. What was the exit? I said, okay, what are the things that marry nicely into the hospitality? And really the number one business to be in my humble opinion, was always the real estate, right? It's an asset that you can never give up. It's an asset that only appreciates, hopefully, if you do it the right way. And it certainly was a wonderful opportunity to marry the two together. Because here you had an entrepreneur, a family entrepreneur, a bunch of people that got together for a common goal. And we had a product. We just needed locations. Well, if you had the spirit or the idea or the intelligence to find those locations, well, then those two went together easily. The more locations I had, the more real estate I found, the more stores I could open. Mm-hmm. And then someday the idea was, well, if you decide to sell or reposition that, or who knows what's going to happen in that industry, well, you always have that hard asset. So we started buying property very quickly, very, very quickly, within 9 months. Yeah. And that resulted into something really special, which is we are one of the largest owners. We're probably the largest owner in Massachusetts of probably the single biggest contiguous site in the entire state. That's a strong statement. I challenge anyone, and I did my homework, I challenge anybody to compare me to any place in the country and find me a project better than Riverwalk. And I say that with respect, being humble as I talk, because I only have 49 other competitors for that designation, right? Out of the 50 states, you can only have in each state one city that's the poorest city. Yeah. Well, Lawrence is the poorest city in Massachusetts. Yeah. So find me throughout the country a project that created 4,500 jobs in the poorest city in less than 10 years with $200 million in investment. And what you see here is something really exciting, because this was probably, and I'm sure the people in this room can attest to it, it was probably the single biggest blight in the poorest city in the state, this where you're at right now. Because you used to go by this project and you knew you were in Lawrence when you went by the building with no roof on it. And these buildings had no roof on it. I heard a great quote once, and I use it all the time. I plagiarize all the time. This quote, I love it. And the quote is this, so the saying goes, when they asked Michelangelo, how did you create something so beautiful, David, out of a block of marble? How did you do that? And he said, well, I actually didn't create David out of the block of marble. I saw David in the marble, and I chipped the marble away and let him free. When we came down here, when we looked at our business, we didn't see abandoned buildings, right? We saw 4,500 jobs. That's what we saw.